Hello, genealogist. It's Craig with Just Genealogy. And I'd like to talk to you about Revolutionary War bounty land laws and Revolutionary War bounty land application files today. So first, let's talk about the best book around to have if you're going to deal with any form of military bounty land. And that's Christine Rose's book on military bounty land, 1776 to 1855. By far, this is the most comprehensive look at bounty land. And it's got so much stuff in it, even I'm overwhelmed, and I'm used to this stuff. Most of your questions that are going to relate to bounty land, the bounty land process, how people acquired land, how they got rid of land, all those kind of things, can be dealt with in Christine Rose's book on military bounty land. We're going to talk about federal land and we're going to talk about state land today. And I'm going to start with federal land. And that federal land covers the period of about 1788 to 1855. There is a guide that can be downloaded from archives.gov. It's reference information paper number 114. It's Research in the Land Entry Files of the General Land Office by Kenneth Hawkins. This book is not only good for military bounty land, it's also good for cash sales and credit sales and General Land Office things. It deals with the General Land Office from the perspective of civilian, from the perspective of military, from the perspective of doing it in person at the National Archives, and doing it by mail. It is a most helpful finding aid that you will learn not to do without. So let's talk about the federal acts to begin with. The first one, believe it or not, was in 1776, and it promised free bounty land to Continental Line officers and soldiers who served until the end of the war and to their heirs of those killed in the war. A private or a non-commissioned officer would get 100 acres, an ensign would get 150, a lieutenant would get 200, a captain would get 300, a major would get 400, a lieutenant colonel would get 450, and a colonel would get 500. So you're able to generally tell by looking at the acreage that's acquired under the Act of 1776 as to what the rank of the individual might be, and you know that they were in the Continental Line. They're not militia. In 1780, the generals had raised such a hoop-de-doo that the eligibility for the bounty land was extended to generals. A brigadier general got 850 acres, and a major general got 1,100. A few years later, in 1788, the Secretary of War was authorized to issue bounty land warrants to eligible veterans upon application, and these warrants were transferable. That meant they could be assigned to someone else. It caused a real problem for speculators. In 1796, the government reserved 4,000 square miles of land in the Northwest Territory known as the U.S. Military District. And all warrants were to located there by 1 January 1800. Obviously, that didn't happen. So through numerous acts, the location of warrants was extended all the way up to 1864. The first time it was extended was on 15 April 1806. Then in 1830, the government authorized scrip certificates that could be used in exchange for unlocated bounty land warrants. There were several scrip acts. Basically, what they did was they said there's no more land in the military district, so you will be able to obtain land elsewhere. That would include Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. No warrants were issued, however, between 1830 and 1832. In 1832, the unlocated lots in the U.S. military district could be sold. Now, one law said there wasn't any more land. Then 2 years later, they said there was land and sell it all off. They're just a little confused. In 1833, they changed the law so that scrip certificates could be used in any public land open to private entry. So it wasn't just the 3 states. Now, anywhere in the public domain, you could use your script. In 1842, it authorized the issue of warrants, providing that all outstanding warrants would be located in the public domain. That basically means in the West. Now, the certificates of location were not assignable, and that patents would only be issued to persons originally eligible or their heirs. By 1842, there were not very many persons originally eligible for land from the Revolution. So it would be heirs or their legal representatives. This caused such a hullabaloo that by 1852, a decade later, warrants were again made assignable. There was an act in 1850, but unfortunately, Revolutionary War soldiers did not, or their heirs did not qualify for that act. There was another hullabaloo, and that resulted in the Act of 1855, and that resulted in the Act of 1855, which fixed it so that there now was a lifetime issue of 160 acres to all soldiers, regardless of rank and pretty much regardless of war. In other words, it was not only the Revolution, it was 1812, it was the Indian Wars, it was the Mexican War, those kind of things. They had to serve at least 14 days or take part in any battle during the Revolutionary War. This meant that those individuals who didn't qualify for a pension under the Act of 1832 because they could not get to 6 months service, now all of a sudden were eligible for bounty land. And it could go to their widows or minor children. A person who had previously received less than 160 acres could apply for the balance. So whenever you see less than 160 acres, you want to look to see if they in fact applied for additional acreage to get up to that 160 acres. Now in 1856, the act was extended to Naval and Marine Corps officers and enlisted personnel, their widows and minor children, because somehow they were forgotten about in the 1855 Act. And then in 1852, and then in 1858, the issue of warrants ends. So there's no more military bounty land issued after the Act of 1855 or 56, depending on whether you're Navy or Army or whatever, by 1858. So what happens after 1858, they are going to be dealing with the concept of homestead. And under the Act of 1864, any outstanding warrants, in other words, warrants already in the hands of soldiers or their heirs, could be located at any time, anywhere in the federal domain. So do this first. Download the finding aid to research in the land entry files of the General Land Office. That's Reference Information Paper 114. If you Google Reference Information Paper 114, it will take you directly to a PDF file that you can download. Also go to archives.gov and type in the search engine bounty land or land entry records, and that will take you to this page, and take a look at it. Specifically read the pieces that deal with surrendered military bounty land warrants. The records that you're going to be dealing with are going to be the records of the Department of Veterans Affairs, Record Group 15, because these contain bounty land application files, and they can be either in the pension file or in the unindexed bounty land files. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Record Group 49 is the records of the Bureau of Land Management, and that's where you're going to find the land entry files, the surveys, all the stuff that has to do with somebody actually getting the land after the application. So in the case of the Revolutionary War, for the most part, you're going to be able to find the bounty land nomenclature on the pension jacket or in the pension. Generally, if it's in the pensions, it's on the pension jacket. And if by reading this, we see that Phineas Aiken from New Hampshire has a bounty land warrant, BLWT. Certificate number is 2383. It's 160 acres, and it's under the Act of 1855. Remember, if it's not 160 acres or less than 160 acres, you want to look for further land. The land entry files, which you're going to find in Record Group 49, deal with evidence of first title. Remember that these are transfers of land from a government, the government, to an individual, done by patent. These are not land deeds. When this individual who acquires the patent sells that land, there will be the first deed. So sometimes you see the concept of patent, then the concept of first deed. And a first deed is a sale from a person who got a patent to a person who now is going to acquire the land. In order to look at the land entry files, you need the warrant number, the number of acres, and the year of the act. So 45679-160-1855, or it may just be 55 like we just looked at. I always go to the Bureau of Land Management website. You can get there easily by typing in Bureau of Land Management Patent Search. And here we see that Phineas Aiken, there's his document number, that's the same thing as his certificate number, 2383. And we see that it's under the authority of 1855. And we also see that it's 160 acres. So this is exactly the individual that is identified in that Revolutionary War pension record, which can be found on Fold 3. Now, when we look at the names there, we see Phineas, we see Elizabeth, we see John, and then we see Robert O'Gibbons. My sense is that Phineas was the soldier, Elizabeth was his wife, she outlived him, and we pretty much know that because Elizabeth's name is on Phineas's pension envelope, which we didn't get into. We only looked at the envelope. But inside, he has a pension, and she, well, let's go back and look. Nope, no pension. All it is the bounty land. If he would have gotten a pension, there would be an S with a number after it. If she would have gotten a pension, there would have been a W with a number after it. There may have been an R in either case with a number after it, and they could still qualify for bounty land because remember, under the Act of 1855, they only had to be active for 14 days. So I'm going to go write this down to myself, and I'm going to go research Phineas Aiken a little bit more and see what I can find out about him and talk about him as a soldier and researching him at some point in the future, just because he doesn't have a pension. So let's go back here. We know that Elizabeth outlives him because her name shows up on that pension jacket. The pension jacket, that's not a pension. John is likely their son, and Robert O'Gibbons is probably the assignee. In other words, the person that they sold their warrant to. There are a couple of other things that you want to do on this Bureau of Land Management website. You want to go and look at the patent image, which is one of the tabs, and that will take you to a patent image. And notice the patent is being issued not to Phineas, but to Elizabeth Aiken, widow of Phineas Aiken, Private Revolutionary War. And then there's the description of the land. By going to related documents, you can get to the land status record details, and that will show you where it is on the ground. So Township 21, South Range 23, east of the 6th Principal Meridian in Kansas. It just makes it so much easier to put them on the ground that way. So where do you find the other information, the necessary information? Well, the application files are more than likely in pension materials or in unindexed bounty land materials. There is the Bureau of Land Management website. Don't forget Google Bureau of Land Management patent search. Or you could also search for BLM GLO records if you can remember that. Go back and read what it has to say about surrendered military bounty land warrants so that you can get up to snuff on how there are other ways that the bounty land could be processed in such a way that you didn't get bounty land. As promised, we can talk about the state acts. Now, not all states had bounty land. Connecticut had bounty land. Georgia was one of the most lenient of the groups of people that have bounty land. They would let almost just about anybody get bounty land. Citizens, loyalists, all kinds of people. Maryland had a tract out in western Maryland. Massachusetts, New York, North Carolina's tract was in Tennessee. Pennsylvania did it as donation land out in western Pennsylvania. South Carolina. Virginia actually has two kinds of laws dealing with bounty land. They are those that deal with the regular Virginia soldiers and then those that deal with Clark's regiment, the Illinois regiment. So two different sections. Read about your state of interest in the Revolutionary War Bounty Land Grants Awarded by States Governments book by Lloyd Boxstruck, and that will be of great use to you. So you want to look in two places. You want to look in BLM to see if they got a federal grant. You want to look in Boxstruck to see if they got a Revolutionary War Bounty Land Grant awarded by a state. Now, the Pennsylvania donation lands are not here, but you can find those on Fold 3 in Pennsylvania archives. You want to look for any published materials that relate to the state. These are a couple of books from Virginia. Catalog of Revolutionary Soldiers and Sailors of the Commonwealth of Virginia to whom land bounty warrants were granted by Virginia for military service in the War for Independence. That's called Wilson. There also, just as an aside, is another catalog of French and Indian War soldiers. That's known as Taylor. That's also available. And there is one book that combines these two together as two different sections. It's likely that you'll encounter rejected claims at some point, land grant claims, and William Lindsay Hopkins did a book on rejected Virginia Revolutionary War land claims. So that will probably be useful to you too if you can't find something relating to them in Virginia. Also for Virginia, and I've talked about this before, and there's another YouTube video on it, is the Script Act of 1852. Remember I talked about the scripts beginning in 1830? Well, the Virginia-specific ones are 1852. Margie Brown's book on genealogical abstracts is an excellent resource for dealing with those materials. So a short one. This has been Craig with Just Genealogy, talking about Revolutionary War Bounty Land. Don't forget to download Kenneth Hawkins' Finding Aid to the General Land Office. It will be helpful not only to you in doing Revolutionary War bounty land, but also any other war prior to the Civil War. And also it will be helpful to you for doing cash sales and credit sales in the General Land Office. Y'all have a great day. Bye.